The sky above Earth glowed with an unusual light that had no origin from the sun. Satellites had detected it hours earlier, but the human world had thought it was another strange phenomenon, like a meteor shower or solar flare. It was not. The light came from a massive silhouette that hovered above the atmosphere, a warship unlike anything humans had ever seen. Its surface was dark, metallic, and bristling with weapons that shimmered faintly, humming with energy. The alien ship was enormous, so vast it blocked out entire cities when seen from the ground. In the control rooms of the Intergalactic Coalition, generals and commanders watched the planet below with a sense of assured victory. They had faced species before, countless worlds conquered, and countless armies destroyed. But Earth had been different. Its humans were primitive, chaotic, and emotional. They fought with technology far inferior to the Coalition's and had no starships capable of interstellar war. The solution, the commanders had decided, was simple: deploy their deadliest weapon. They called it the Blade, and it was said that no species could survive its presence. Its reflexes were faster than thought, its body stronger than steel, and its mind engineered solely to kill. Every movement it made was precise, calculated, perfect. Where armies had failed, the Blade would succeed. Where diplomacy had faltered, it would erase the problem with efficiency. For the Coalition, Earth would fall in hours. On the surface, humans were unaware of the specifics. Citizens were fleeing cities, scrambling for safety, while military analysts tried to interpret the strange readings from space. Fighter jets scrambled, missile defenses activated, and communications across the planet's defense grid buzzed with panic and confusion. The humans had faced threats before, but nothing like this. It was the kind of force that made even the bravest soldier feel small, like an insect underfoot. Lieutenant Mara Renshaw had watched the horizon from the remnants of a ruined city. The ground beneath her boots was cracked and scorched from previous skirmishes, and smoke rose from abandoned buildings like gray fingers pointing toward the sky. Mara's squad had been scattered, some hiding in tunnels, some taken by the chaos above. She had no reinforcements left, only her training, her instincts, and a stubborn determination that had carried her through worse. The first shock came when the Blade descended from orbit. It moved with a speed that seemed unnatural, a blur that cut through the clouds and the atmosphere without friction. Mara could see the city's defenses fire at it, missiles streaking through the air, but the projectiles vanished against the creature as though they had hit nothing. The Blade landed, and the ground itself seemed to recoil from its weight. Soldiers screamed, and some froze entirely, paralyzed by terror. When the Blade began to move through the streets, it was like watching a predator in a museum. It took careful steps, scanning, observing, and calculating. Humans tried to fire, throwing everything they had, but the creature dodged bullets, twisted away from explosions, and struck with a precision that made Mara's stomach tighten. Whole squads vanished in moments. Concrete walls were sliced as though paper, and armored vehicles crumpled like toys. Yet Mara did not run. She crouched behind a broken wall, watching. Her pulse was steady, her mind racing through options. She had been trained to survive, but this was beyond any simulation. She had to observe first, understand the threat, and then act. Her instincts screamed that humans could not defeat this being with strength alone. Only wit, courage, and speed could make the difference. The first human casualties were brutal. Mara saw them and felt a pang of fear, but not panic. They were soldiers, like her, caught unprepared, and she knew she had to be sharper. She noticed patterns. The Blade paused before striking, calculated angles, and reacted only to movements it considered threats. That hesitation, tiny as it was Mara's first glimmer of hope. If she could act within that fraction of a second, she could survive. The Blade came closer. Its weapon glowed with energy, a blade that could cut through metal like butter. Mara's heart pounded, but she steadied herself. When it raised the weapon to strike another soldier, she saw her chance. She dove forward, not with the intent to attack, but to interfere with its motion. She caught the edge of the weapon with her bare hands, feeling a shock of heat and vibration run through her. The soldiers around her froze. The blade recoiled slightly, confused. No human had done this before. Mara could see the momentary pause in its movement, a fraction of doubt forming in the mind of a creature designed not to hesitate. She smiled, almost casually, though her hands burned and her muscles screamed. She had survived the first strike. Humanity had not been defeated. Chaos erupted around them. Humans were inspired by what they saw. Even civilians hiding in alleys began to act with courage, helping each other, using debris as weapons and guiding soldiers to safer positions. The blade adjusted, striking in new ways, but each time, humans adapted. They were not mindless, not predictable. Every failed strike by the blade fed the humans' confidence, turning fear into determination. From orbit, coalition commanders were baffled. Their reports indicated failure after failure. This species, so primitive in technology, was surviving their deadliest weapon. The blade moved with flawless skill, yet it could not break the human spirit. Mara's actions, a single soldier in a ruined city, became the spark of hope that spread across Earth. Communications scrambled by panic-carried stories. Humans were fighting back, humans were surviving, and humans were catching the blade. In a command tent far from the front lines, Mara caught her breath and assessed the situation. She knew this was only the beginning. The coalition would not stop with one operative. Their fleets were massive, their technology superior, and they expected humanity to fall. But she also knew something the aliens did not. Humans were unpredictable. They could adapt, think creatively, and act with courage that no algorithm could calculate. That unpredictability was their weapon. The blade moved again, more cautiously this time. It sensed the shift in human behavior, the spark of defiance that had not been there before. Mara positioned herself, ready, her mind sharp and alert. She could see the path of its next strike, and she was prepared. She was not a machine, she was not perfect, but she had something the blade did not: human ingenuity and the will to survive. Across the city, humans began to organize spontaneously. Makeshift barricades went up, small teams coordinated counterattacks, and civilians assisted wherever they could. Mara realized that this fight was not just her own. It was humanity's. Every human who survived and fought back was a testament to their species' resilience. Even in the face of annihilation, they did not yield. The blade paused again, scanning the humans, trying to predict their movements. Mara took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to engage again. This time, she would test the limits of her courage. She was not just surviving for herself. She was surviving for every human who looked up at the sky with fear and hope intertwined. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruined city, Mara faced the blade. It moved with lethal precision. But humanity had something stronger than precision, something the blade could not understand. Fearless resolve, creativity born of necessity, and an unshakable will to live. Mara knew that if she could hold her ground here, humanity could hold the planet. The battle had only just begun. The humans were frightened, battered, and small against the alien force, but they had survived the first night. And in surviving, they had sent a message to the galaxy. Humans were not weak, humans were not fragile, and humans could face the deadliest weapon without yielding. Mara smiled once more, her hands still tingling from the heat of the blade. She did not flinch, she did not panic. She simply prepared for the next strike. Humanity had survived its first encounter with the blade, and that survival was more than luck. It was a statement. The galaxy had underestimated humans, and that mistake would echo for years to come. The night air over the ruined city was heavy with smoke and the smell of burning metal. Fires burned in broken streets, lighting the destruction in flickering orange, casting long, trembling shadows. Mara Renshaw moved cautiously, her senses alert to every sound. The blade had retreated after its first encounter, but she knew it would return. It was not a creature that stopped easily, nor one that could tolerate failure. Its movements were deliberate, efficient, and patient. Across the city, scattered human survivors whispered and organized. Mara saw them signaling to one another, using hand gestures and flashlight patterns to communicate. Civilians carried what could be used as weapons: broken metal rods, pipes, even chains pulled from vehicles. Engineers and technicians were working feverishly to repurpose abandoned equipment into defensive tools. The ingenuity of humans, fragile and untrained as they were, began to emerge in the face of danger. Mara took a deep breath and addressed a small group of soldiers huddled near a barricade. "We can't let fear control us," she said. Her voice was steady, even calm, carrying authority beyond her rank. "The blade is fast, it's lethal, but it is not invincible. Watch, learn, and act together. We survive by thinking, not just by running." Her words sparked something in them. Even soldiers who had moments ago been frozen with terror straightened, gripping their weapons with renewed determination. Mara knew the aliens expected humans to be predictable, to panic, to scatter. They did not expect coordination, intelligence, and the kind of courage that comes not from recklessness, but from necessity. The first human counterstrike came unexpectedly. Using the debris around the streets, a group of civilians and soldiers had created a trap. Metal scraps were rigged with old explosives, wires leading to hidden triggers. When the blade approached, it moved with its usual lethal precision, cutting down anything in its path, but it didn't anticipate the ingenuity of humans working with limited resources. The trap detonated, sending a shockwave of debris and fire toward the alien. The blade recoiled, momentarily disoriented. It shook its head, scanning the humans, its glowing eyes narrowing. It was not used to errors or miscalculations in combat. Mara seized the moment. She darted forward with a makeshift shield of scrap metal, moving closer to the blade. She did not attack. Humans lacked the strength to harm it directly, but she interfered with its movement, forcing it to adjust mid-strike. The blade struck again, faster this time, its weapon humming with energy. Mara sidestepped, letting the edge pass close enough to feel the heat but not touch her skin. Sparks flew where her shield met the weapon. Mara's heart raced, but her mind remained focused. Every strike, every movement. She studied patterns, weaknesses, angles. The blade was not invincible. It had rhythm, predictability, even if subtle. Elsewhere in the city, other humans began to experiment with tactics. Teams coordinated ambushes using narrow streets and ruined buildings to limit the blade's speed. They threw distractions, used mirrors to confuse its sensors, and even improvised nets and ropes to slow it down. Every small victory, every moment that the blade had to pause or adjust, added to human confidence. They were learning faster than the coalition expected. In orbit, coalition commanders were growing frustrated. Their reports were filled with confusion. The blade was effective, but the humans were adapting. "They should not survive," one commander said, voice tight with disbelief. "We deployed the ultimate killer. They should be extinct." Another shook his head, staring at the screens, trying to predict human behavior. Every calculation failed. Every simulation that had worked against other species did not work against Earth's inhabitants. Back on the ground, Mara moved silently through the ruins, guiding her squad to positions where they could observe without exposing themselves unnecessarily. She had learned that fear could be a weapon as much as courage, but discipline was stronger. Her team used the ruined buildings as cover, whispering instructions, making minor movements that the blade could not track easily. They had become shadows, almost invisible, yet ready to strike in small, effective ways. The blade, for all its precision, began to recognize patterns in human behavior, but it did not understand the adaptability that came from instinct and imagination. It had never faced opponents who could improvise mid-combat, who could learn from mistakes faster than the creature could adjust its tactics. Humans were chaotic, unpredictable, and they used that unpredictability as a weapon. A sudden explosion echoed through the city. Mara ducked behind rubble as the blade's attention shifted. A team of engineers had rigged an abandoned vehicle with fuel and explosives. They had lured the alien toward it and the resulting blast shook the streets violently. The blade emerged, its form scorched, but unbroken. It glared at the humans with a silent intensity that could have frozen lesser species. Mara stepped forward again, her movements precise, her shield held high. "We can't stop now," she whispered to her squad. "Every second counts. Every action matters. We don't need to defeat it with brute force. We need to survive and slow it down." The blade lunged, faster than before, cutting through the barricade where Mara's team had been hiding. She dodged and rolled, narrowly avoiding the deadly edge. Her hands ached, her muscles screamed, but she did not falter. Every strike taught her something. Every movement gave her insight. Humans were learning to survive in a way that was almost instinctual, blending courage with intellect. In the chaos, civilians began to act heroically. One young man pulled an injured soldier to safety, improvising a stretcher from broken metal and cloth. Another woman climbed to a rooftop, signaling with lights to guide Mara's squad through safer paths. The humans were fighting not just for themselves, but for each other. This unity, this collective spirit was something the blade could not anticipate. As dawn approached, the battle showed no signs of slowing. The blade paused on a high rooftop, scanning the streets, calculating its next move. Mara crouched in the shadows below, watching. She had begun to understand its strategy, its movements, its timing. Humans were beginning to predict the unpredictable, turning fear into insight. Mara noticed a momentary flicker in the blade's focus. It hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, and she saw an opportunity. She signaled to her team, and they executed a coordinated maneuver. Distractions, improvised barriers, and rapid movement from multiple directions. The blade struck in several places at once, but it could not respond to everything. Humans slipped past, survived, and regrouped. Across the city, this small victory spread hope. Communications networks, still functioning despite damage, carried messages of defiance. Humans were resisting. Humans had survived the deadliest weapons sent against them. Each report fueled morale, not just for soldiers, but for civilians hiding in fear. Humanity was beginning to understand its own strength, courage, ingenuity, and unity. The coalition commanders watched in disbelief. Their ultimate weapon, designed to eliminate an entire species in minutes, had failed to break the human's will. The blade was formidable, but it was not enough. Humanity's spirit was something no algorithm, no weapon, could calculate or predict. Mara and her squad found temporary shelter in a collapsed building. They tended minor injuries, shared water, and discussed strategy. Mara's voice was calm but firm. "We've survived the first night."
"That's more than we expected. Tomorrow we will learn more about the blade."
"Every encounter teaches us. Every move we survive strengthens us."
"The galaxy thinks we are weak. Let's show them they are wrong."
The humans rested as best they could, knowing the battle was far from over. The blade would return, stronger, faster, and with renewed focus. But so would they. They had learned that survival depended not just on weapons, but on courage, adaptability, and the refusal to yield. Humanity had survived the first encounter, and the legend of those who faced the ultimate killer was only beginning. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting light on the damaged streets and burned buildings, Mara looked out at the city. The humans who remained were few, battered but unbroken. They had caught the first strike of the galaxy's deadliest weapon and lived to tell the story. Mara clenched her fists and smiled. They were not just surviving, they were learning, evolving, and proving to the universe that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. In the sky above, the blade hovered, observing, calculating, and preparing for the next phase. But the humans were ready. They had caught the first strike, adapted, and survived. And in surviving, they had ignited a spark that could not be extinguished. Humanity was not just a species, they were a force, unpredictable, clever, and unyielding. The galaxy would soon learn that the human spirit was a weapon even deadliest blades could not defeat. The day broke over the ruined city, painting the broken streets with a harsh golden light. Smoke and fire mingled with the morning fog, creating an eerie haze. Mara Renshaw surveyed the streets from a high vantage point atop a shattered building. The blade had not returned yet, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Every human in the city had felt the weight of its presence, and now they were preparing to respond, not merely survive. Across the city, humans were no longer hiding. Teams of soldiers and civilians moved with purpose, setting traps, clearing paths, and sharing information. Even those who had been terrified the previous night were finding courage. They improvised weapons from debris, welded pieces of metal into crude shields, and repurposed old machinery into tools of defense. Their coordination had improved overnight, and Mara felt a quiet pride in their resilience. Mara gathered her squad, huddling near a makeshift command post in the remains of a collapsed office building. She spoke with calm authority, her eyes scanning the maps and digital readouts that still functioned in pockets of the city. We survived the first night because we observed and adapted. Tonight, we fight smarter.
We strike where they cannot anticipate. We do not wait to be attacked.
We make them react. Her team nodded. The words inspired not fear, but determination. Mara knew that the coalition had never faced humans like this before. Species that could combine courage with intelligence, improvisation with instinct. Every failure of the blade in the past hours had only strengthened human resolve. Outside, engineers worked feverishly to modify weapons. Old military vehicles were retrofitted with makeshift turrets and automated firing mechanisms. Explosives were rigged in the streets using materials scavenged from ruined buildings. Even drones, long considered obsolete, were armed with small missiles and cameras to provide surveillance. Humanity was adapting with speed and creativity that no algorithm could predict. Then it came. The blade. It descended from the sky with a hum that vibrated through the streets. It moved silently at first, then with sudden, deadly speed, cutting a path toward the humans. Its glowing weapon hummed with energy, reflecting the light of burning buildings. Mara's squad had prepared an ambush. They moved silently into position, ready to execute the plan they had spent hours devising. The first attack was a test. Mara signaled a team to trigger an improvised explosive trap. The blast shook the street, sending debris and fire toward the blade. The creature twisted midair, narrowly avoiding the worst of the explosion. But the humans were ready. Mara's squad attacked from multiple directions, distracting and confounding the alien. Each human movement was calculated to exploit the small openings in the blade's defenses. The blade reacted with lethal precision, striking where humans moved, but it could not anticipate every maneuver. The humans were unpredictable, chaotic in a way that made its calculations unreliable. Mara herself engaged carefully, using cover and her observations of its rhythm to evade strikes. Her team coordinated attacks with civilians, guiding them through safer paths, distracting the blade when necessary, and rescuing those who were trapped or injured. For the first time, the blade faltered. Not completely, but enough for humans to exploit. Mara saw a slight delay in its strike and seized the moment. She lunged forward with a makeshift metal shield, intercepting the energy blade. Sparks flew, heat radiating, but she held firm. Her muscles ached, her hands burned, but she remained calm. This was no longer just survival. It was resistance. Humans across the city began to take the offensive. Teams moved in coordination, using rooftops, narrow alleyways, and barricades to control the battlefield. Small squads guided the blade into traps, using debris and improvised explosives to limit its speed. Civilians armed with basic tools assisted where they could, distracting the alien or creating obstacles in its path. Even in chaos, humanity found order in action. The blade's movements grew erratic. It had never faced opponents who could adapt and predict so quickly. Each attack it launched was countered by improvisation, each advance slowed by human creativity. Mara noticed that it began to rely less on strategy and more on brute force. a sign that it was being forced out of its calculated rhythm.
This was the moment humans had been waiting for. Mara signaled her squad.
"Now," she whispered. They executed a coordinated move. Several explosive traps detonated simultaneously. A team of sharpshooters fired improvised plasma bursts, and Mara herself moved forward to distract the blade, baiting it into the traps. The streets erupted in chaos, and for the first time, the blade struggled to respond to multiple threats at once. The human spirit showed itself in every corner. Civilians helped soldiers, rescued the wounded, and even took part in minor attacks. Mara saw a teenager using a rope to swing a heavy metal pipe at the blade's legs, forcing it to stumble. Engineers fired improvised projectiles, some striking the blade's armor with sparks and scratches. It was not a perfect attack, but the accumulation of small actions began to wear down the alien. From the rooftops, human observers communicated with squads on the ground, guiding them to safer positions and alerting them to weaknesses. Mara's strategy had evolved overnight. She was no longer reacting but predicting, using every advantage humans possessed: intuition, adaptability, and collective courage. The blade was fast, deadly, and precise, but it could not anticipate the ingenuity of humans working together. The battle raged across the city, streets becoming chaotic arenas of survival and resistance. Explosions shook buildings, fire consumed debris, and humans moved with a determined rhythm. Mara ducked behind a half-collapsed wall as the blade swung its weapon. She waited for the right moment, then darted forward, forcing the creature to adjust mid-strike. Sparks flew, metal screeched, and humans cheered in the distance as they realized their tactics were working. Mara realized something vital. The blade was learning from humans, but humans were learning faster. Every failed attack it made gave humans insight into its weaknesses. Every successful defensive maneuver reinforced their courage. The Coalition's ultimate weapon was formidable, but humans were not merely surviving. They were evolving in response to the threat. As the sun climbed higher, the intensity of the fight did not diminish. Mara and her team coordinated more complex attacks. They created decoys, using mannequins and debris to trick the blade into miscalculating. Civilians used mirrors to reflect sunlight into its sensors, temporarily blinding it. Engineers rigged automated devices to strike when it approached. Each action chipped away at its efficiency, forcing it into defensive maneuvers. In the chaos, Mara caught her breath briefly, assessing the battlefield. Her squad was exhausted but still effective. They had adapted to the blade's speed, predicting its strikes and forcing it to react to multiple simultaneous threats. Mara smiled quietly. Humanity had begun to turn the tide. They were no longer passive targets. They were active participants in their survival, and their defiance was contagious. The blade's attacks became more desperate. It had never encountered a species that could endure and adapt so quickly. Its strikes grew broader and less precise, its calculated movements disrupted by the unpredictability of humans acting with intuition and courage. Mara saw an opening. Using her shield and quick movements, she led the blade toward a narrow street lined with improvised explosives. The traps detonated with synchronized timing, sending shockwaves of fire and debris into the corridor. The blade staggered, its momentum disrupted for the first time in hours. Mara's squad seized the opportunity, moving in coordinated bursts to push it further into the traps. Civilians cheered in the background, their hope renewed by the sight of the alien faltering. For the first time, the blade hesitated. It assessed the humans, scanning for patterns, but the unpredictability was overwhelming. Mara realized that this hesitation was a turning point. Humanity had survived not through brute strength, but through ingenuity, courage, and collective action. They had forced the deadliest weapon in the galaxy to react, rather than dictate. The city echoed with the sounds of survival, explosions, shouts, and the hum of energy as humans fought back with whatever they could find. Mara moved swiftly, guiding her squad and coordinating attacks. They were no longer on the defensive. They were shaping the battlefield, using intelligence and courage to outmaneuver the superior force. As evening approached, The blade retreated temporarily, recognizing the difficulty of continuing in the face of such determined resistance. Mara and her team regrouped, tending to the wounded and reinforcing their positions. The humans who remained were battered, but unbroken. They had survived not because of superior technology, but because of spirit, ingenuity, and the refusal to yield. Mara looked out over the city as the sun set, casting long shadows across the ruins. She knew this was only one battle in a war that would test them again and again, but humanity had proven something vital. Even the deadliest weapon could not crush their will. They were unpredictable, creative, and fearless. The galaxy had underestimated them, and that mistake would be remembered. The blade would return. Mara knew it, and so did every human survivor. But they were ready. They had learned to fight smarter, to act as one, and to turn fear into strength. Humanity was no longer merely surviving. They were resisting, evolving, and shaping their own destiny. The legend of the humans who caught the blade was growing, and their story would inspire courage across the planet and beyond. In that moment, Mara clenched her fists and smiled. They had not won the war, but they had won a vital victory. Humanity had taken the first real step toward proving that they were not just survivors. They were a species to be reckoned with. And the galaxy would soon learn that humans were capable of things no one, not even the blade, could anticipate. The city lay in a tense silence, broken only by the distant crackle of fires and the hum of damaged machinery. Mara Renshaw crouched behind a fractured wall, scanning the streets with sharp, determined eyes. The humans had survived 2 days of relentless attacks, and now the final confrontation was coming. The blade had returned, larger, faster, and angrier than ever, its energy weapon glowing like molten lightning. But humanity had changed since the first strike. They were no longer scared. They were ready. Across the city, civilians and soldiers worked together with a single purpose. Engineers had completed makeshift weapons, barricades had been reinforced, and scouts relayed movements across the battlefield. The humans had learned from every previous encounter, turning fear into strategy, chaos into opportunity. Mara's team moved silently, positioning themselves in narrow streets and elevated positions. They were ready to face the deadliest weapon in the galaxy. Not just to survive, but to fight back. The blade descended from the sky with a thunderous hum, its presence radiating lethal power. It moved like a shadow, observing the city below, calculating every strike before it even moved. Mara could feel its energy, a wave that made her muscles tense and her heart race. But she did not flinch. She had trained for moments like this, and more importantly, she had learned to trust the human instinct, the creativity and courage that no machine could predict. The first attack came swiftly. The blade lunged toward Mara's position, swinging its energy weapon with a speed that would have obliterated anyone else. Mara rolled aside, narrowly avoiding the strike, and sprang toward cover. Sparks flew where the weapon struck the building behind her, carving deep gashes into concrete. She signaled to her squad, and they moved in perfect coordination, distracting the blade from multiple angles, drawing it toward the traps humans had prepared. The humans had learned to use the environment to their advantage. Narrow alleys forced the blade to slow its movements, debris-littered streets limited its momentum, and improvised barriers forced it to strike cautiously. Mara and her squad executed precise maneuvers, attacking only when the moment was right. Each action was measured, deliberate, and coordinated with civilians who had become integral to the defense. Explosives detonated in sequence, sending clouds of smoke and sparks into the air. The blade twisted mid-strike, narrowly avoiding multiple blasts. It roared, a sound like grinding metal and energy, expressing frustration unlike anything Mara had ever heard. Humans were adapting faster than it could calculate. Each failure forced it to become more cautious, giving Mara and her squad precious seconds to plan their moves. Mara led a small team through a ruined building, using the shadows to their advantage. They climbed to a rooftop, gaining higher ground and better visibility. From this vantage, they could observe the blade's movements more clearly, coordinating attacks with other squads across the city. Humans were everywhere now, on rooftops, in alleyways, behind barricades, moving as one, unpredictable yet coordinated. The blade struck again, faster than before, swinging its glowing weapon with deadly precision. Mara sidestepped, letting it pass mere inches from her. She had caught glimpses of its patterns, the way it adjusted its strikes, the slight pause before a double swing. She relayed the observations to her team, and they began exploiting the openings. A small squad hurled a chain across its legs, forcing it to stumble slightly. Another team used mirrors to reflect sunlight into its sensors, creating confusion. The blade faltered for the first time in days. Humans cheered quietly, hearts pounding. They were not only surviving, they were fighting back. Civilians carried injured soldiers to safety. Engineers improvised new weapons on the fly, and every small victory added to the collective determination. Mara realized that humanity had become more than a species defending itself. They were a force, unified by courage and ingenuity. The blade roared again and attacked with renewed fury, moving toward Mara's position. She waited for the exact moment, timing its strike, and then darted forward. Her makeshift shield deflected the energy blade, sparks flying in all directions. With precise movements, she guided it into a trap the engineers had prepared, a narrow street lined with explosives and reinforced barricades. The traps detonated simultaneously. The blast of fire and debris sent the blade stumbling. Its movements slowed, its strategy disrupted. Mara's squad surged forward, attacking with improvised weapons, forcing the alien to retreat step by step. Civilians assisted wherever they could, throwing objects, creating obstacles, and guiding soldiers to safe positions. The blade, for all its power, could not anticipate the collective creativity and courage of the humans. As the battle continued, Mara noticed something remarkable. The blade's attacks became more desperate, less precise, almost instinctual. It had never faced an opponent that could adapt in real time, that could act unpredictably yet with unity and purpose. Humans were not only surviving, they were forcing it to react to them, and in doing so, they were reshaping the battlefield. Mara and her squad moved strategically through the city, coordinating attacks across multiple locations. They used distraction, misdirection, and environmental advantages to divide the blade's focus. Every strike it made was countered by human ingenuity, and slowly, the alien's momentum began to falter. Mara realized that this was the turning point. Humanity was not merely defending, they were dictating the flow of battle. In a daring maneuver, Mara climbed to the top of a crumbled skyscraper. She used the height to signal teams across the city, guiding them in a synchronized strike. Explosives detonated below, barricades fell in place, and humans moved with perfect timing. The blade, despite its lethal precision, could not adjust to so many simultaneous variables. Its attacks began to miss, hitting walls and empty streets instead of human targets. For the first time, the blade hesitated. It paused, scanning the humans, trying to calculate their next moves. Mara saw the opening she had been waiting for. She signaled her squad to converge, moving swiftly and silently through the shadows. With coordinated precision, they attacked from multiple directions, using every advantage the city offered. The blade roared in frustration but could not strike all angles at once. The humans' collective effort was unstoppable. Civilians, soldiers, and engineers worked as one, exploiting every weakness and improvising in real time. Sparks flew, explosions shook the streets, and energy from the blade's weapons scorched the pavement, but the humans did not yield. Mara felt the exhilaration of their combined courage, knowing that humanity's willpower was stronger than any weapon the galaxy could deploy. Finally, Mara faced the blade directly. Its weapon glowed with deadly intensity, and its eyes fixed on her with calculated precision. But Mara did not flinch. She had studied its movements, understood its rhythm, and timed her actions perfectly. The humans had learned to survive against impossible odds, and now they were ready to dominate. The blade lunged, energy sword swinging with lethal intent. Mara met it head-on, dodging, deflecting, and guiding it toward a trap designed for this final confrontation. Explosives detonated around them, barricades fell, and humans pressed from every side. The blade, despite its power, struggled to react to the sheer unpredictability and coordination of its opponents. The clash was intense. Mara moved with precision, exploiting the creature's hesitation. Sparks flew as weapons clashed, and the air was filled with smoke, dust, and the smell of scorched metal. Yet through it all, humans held their ground. Civilians helped soldiers, engineers guided teams, and Mara's squad struck with perfect timing. The blade's advantage began to slip. In a final coordinated effort, humans converged from multiple angles, forcing the blade into the center of a trap-laden street. Explosives detonated, metal barriers shifted, and humans pressed forward with calculated strikes and distractions. The blade staggered, unable to maintain its precision against the combined ingenuity, courage, and adaptability of the humans. Mara saw the moment of opportunity and acted without hesitation. She guided the creature further into the trap, exploiting the weaknesses they had discovered over days of struggle. The blade attempted to recover, but humans were everywhere, attacking, distracting, and controlling the battlefield. Finally, exhausted and disoriented, the creature paused, recognizing its inability to succeed. The humans had won, not through sheer strength, but through intelligence, courage, and unity. They had survived the deadliest weapon in the galaxy, adapted in real time, and turned desperation into victory. Mara stood tall, breathing heavily but steady, looking over the battlefield. Civilians and soldiers cheered, embracing and helping each other to safety. Humanity had proven itself in the face of impossible odds. The blade, though not destroyed, retreated, understanding that this species was not to be underestimated. It had encountered something it could not predict. Humans who could think, adapt, and act as one. Mara watched as it ascended, glowing energy dimming as it left the city, a silent acknowledgement of humanity's triumph. Mara's squad gathered around her, battered but alive. Engineers checked weapons. Soldiers tended the wounded, and civilians helped where they could. The city was in ruins, but the spirit of its people was unbroken. Humanity had survived the ultimate test, and in doing so, had proven something vital. Strength was not only measured by weapons, but by courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to yield.
As the sun set over the horizon, Mara looked across the ruined city and felt a deep sense of pride.
Humans had faced extinction and survived. They had confronted the deadliest weapon the galaxy could deploy and adapted, learned, and triumphed. The legend of humanity catching the blade had begun, and it would echo across the stars. The galaxy had underestimated humans, but Mara knew it would never forget. They had not only survived, they had evolved, resisted, and shown that the human spirit was more powerful than any weapon. Humanity had proven that even the most lethal force could not break them, and that defiance, intelligence, and courage were the true weapons of a species worth remembering.
Mara clenched her fists and smiled. The blade might return someday, but humanity would be ready.
They were survivors, fighters, and innovators. They had turned fear into strength, chaos into strategy, and survival into triumph. The legend of the humans who caught the blade would inspire generations, not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. And in that moment, Mara realized something profound. They were no longer just humans fighting for survival. They were a symbol, a reminder to the galaxy that some species could endure, adapt, and rise above any challenge. The galaxy had sent its deadliest weapon, and humanity had not only survived, it had won, in the most human way possible, with courage, ingenuity, and unyielding spirit.